what he did was provoke me into doing the most ridiculous thing I ever could have imagined. Something I never could or would have imagined on my own. Never in 1,000 freaking years would I have thought it was a good idea to spill my guts on paper. If you'd known me just a little while ago, you'd understand that David here wasn't the kind of guy who believed in the therapeutic qualities of being introspective. It just wasn't my cup. It wasn't my bag. But now look at me. All of a sudden, it's the most important thing in the world for me to get the honest stuff out. All of a sudden, I'm not really all that worried about the retardedness I'm going to feel standing up. All of a sudden, I'm not really all that worried about the retardedness I'm going to feel standing up next to Mr. Wonderful, Captain Asshole America. I guess the shock has passed. I'm growing up a bit. I know what I am, and I know that if I'm going to do anything about making a happy life for myself, I'll have to be pretty willing to change and keep my mind open. Yes, this is what Herman taught me, what he told me over and over. I think the most significant change is that I now think of other options besides hitting a person when they piss me off, when they show me how worthless they are, or especially when they try and make me feel worthless. These days I talk more things out, and I know we're only as worthless as we let ourselves be. See, I've even learned to put things in my own words. You can be sure that Herman never contemplated being worthless the way I have. That's my own special variety of self-help, or self-affirmation. I fight a feeling of worthlessness while he fights things like limits and people's ignorance and pessimism. Does that explain something about our friendship? It can be a bit strange, not even one-sided. More often it probably looks no-sided. Let me tell you something Herman said to me a couple years back. I was giving him a hard time for listening to so much Bob Marley, a phase he went through. And I said something like, "What, you believe in all that Rastafarian crap, Herman? You're gonna become some white Rasta boy now?" And you know what he said to me, which is really quite telling? He said, "No, Chief. I just believe in love songs." Man, I couldn't believe it. So anyway, I grew up in the middle of the block. Herman lived on the corner. The cars going by my house were going home or to the office. The cars going by Herman's house were going everywhere. Herman's room was on the south side of his family's house facing Canner Street in New Haven, the busy east-west route that cuts the neighborhood in half and takes you to the highway. Frequently, the cars heading to the highway would run the four-way stop sign in front of Herman's house and bounce and spark over the hump in the intersection. You'd see the drivers look both ways in the middle of the intersection, too late for anything but to say, "Good, I'm not going to die here today." When we were kids, a crossing guard refused to let anyone cross there. On our way home, the crazy old man crossing guard used to turn us around and make us walk down to the stoplight 3 blocks behind us. We'd walk down 100 feet and then dash across the street right into Herman's side driveway. Every day the old man chewed us out and then pushed us toward the traffic lights by our shoulders. As soon as he let go, we were out of his reach. As soon as he let go and we were out of his reach, we'd check quickly for cars and race across the street into Herman's small yard. This was the only way to deal with a crossing guard. Fight the power. This was the only way to deal with a crossing guard. Fight the power. Let me quickly say something about what Herman looks like. He sort of looks like a cross between David Letterman and Robert De Niro. Sort of incredibly goofy at times, but just as often tough and scary. Well, no, he doesn't. Maybe more like a cross between that Sherlock Holmes guy on TV and a much thinner Chris Farley. Oh, how about this? Herman's like a cross between Richie Cunningham and Chuck D from Public Enemy. Or maybe Henry Rollins and Bob Costas. Or maybe a little like the young Sinatra, only a little less scrawny. I don't know. How about this? Herman doesn't look like anyone really. Is that fair? I mean, nobody does. Nobody really actually looks like anyone else in the world, right? Whatever, it's weird. He actually looks a lot like Marky Mark Wahlberg, that is. Herman and I spent just about every day of our lives together. We met on the first day of preschool. I was getting in a fight with a scrawny Indian kid named Pocky over in the corner of the playground, and then Herman came over and tried to pull me off the kid. I knocked Herman down and he cried, and then he kept crying. And at first I thought he was crying because I knocked him down, but the more I think about it now, the more I think he was probably crying at the shock of seeing the ugly real world for the first time. It was probably a real shock to go to a place that wasn't so loving and friendly the way his home life was. For a long time I thought it was my job to toughen him up. I figured he needed someone like me to get him used to how unfair the real world is. For a long time he was your total classic mama's boy. Then, somehow, he made a transition into Herman America along the way that seemed to defy the fact that he was more often avoiding fights than trying to get involved in them. I guess we could call that early signs of smartness. However, even though Herman struggled to figure out the world as hard as he did, even though Herman struggled to figure out the world as hard as he did, it didn't necessarily mean he was weak, just because he was thinking more than he was taking action. In the end, you'll see, Herman sort of proved that he was more prepared to take action than most of us. And he pretty much proved that my idea of toughness didn't hold much water after about, 1982, if that long. What happened was this. Right before senior year, he dropped out of school in Boston and transferred down to Yukon. He got wind of the fact that his parents weren't raking in the millions, so he quit school and left without giving his parents a chance to convince him not to. And of course they were devastated, but he didn't feel quite as strongly as they did about the need to graduate from a school with a good name. So what he did was continue his education while saving his parents over $20,000. He graduated with his English and his history degrees, but didn't lose any sleep over the fact that he wasn't going to interview with the same number of Wall Street firms that he could have if he had stayed where he was. I guess he knew early on, whether or not he told anyone about it, that he wasn't going to be working any 70-hour a week job in New York City after graduation. I don't think he decided on Colorado until the summer, but nevertheless I know he had plans to stick around the East for too long. I'm pretty sure he would I know he had no plans to stick around the East for too long. I'm pretty sure he would come back to it, but probably not until he'd seen the entire world a few times over. Endless Summer 3 or something. As a matter of fact, he'll probably go right back to New Haven, if he could swing. His dad grew up there too, and his mom not far away either. And I think he sort of likes the idea of remaining loyal to his hometown. He really sees it as something heroic in his dad, sticking it out, even through all the recessions. His dad is like Mr. Righteous and Mr. Community. His mom is like the smartest, coolest mom around, and she was always around to help with stuff, or just to hang out with. She was never into bullshit like hanging around in malls. Anyway, she usually came in dirtier at the end of the day than Herman did from all her gardening and stuff. It's not difficult to see where Herman got his righteousness. Both his parents are basically saints. My parents are cool, but probably just a little more selfish than his. At any given hour of the day, Herman's fridge could feed all the kids in the neighborhood. My kitchen just wasn't designed for kids, you might say. My parents didn't believe in them. Apparently I made too much of a mess when I ate. Anyway, I don't blame them for it, my parents, that is. It's just the way they are. And besides, I know I'm not going to stand for any kids of mine making messes all the time. So Herman dropped out and moved down to Storrs, Connecticut. into the second floor of a split-level building that houses a laundromat and a falafel restaurant where he short-order cooked for a while, where he short-order cooked for a while. He even paid his own rent, which I don't think his parents asked him to do. My guess is that they were probably offended somewhat. Impressed, sure, but offended that Herman was so set on becoming independent from them. And there are other things I know they couldn't be too happy about, if in fact they know about them. But those might be stories for another time. We'll see. Herman has only gotten 6 haircuts in the last 6 years, evenly spaced, 1 per year. He shaves his head bald and then doesn't worry about it until it's about a year grown out and getting in his face too much. He was 16 when he looked at the $10 he was about to spend on a haircut and took it instead and bought clippers. What am I, the son of a banker? He said, coming out of his house one day.